Here are chapters 1 and 2 of an interesting book on ancient Indian history of Mahabharata times, Bhishma Nirvana, an Astronomy Poison Pill by Dr. Nilesh O. Chapter 1. Why write a book on Bhishma Nirvana? Why do I write books? Why do I think? Why should I be passionate? Because things could be made different. They could be made better. Zygmunt Bauman. Before I published my first book, When Did the Mahabharata War Happen? The Mystery of Arundhati, there were more than 130 different claims for the year of Mahabharata War. These claims ranged from 7300 BCE through 500 BCE. Only one of them could be true, since the other plausible scenario was that none of them could be true. I proved why 5561 BCE or 5561 BCE is the only possible date for the year of Mahabharata War. In a scientific endeavor, all claims, even well tested and validated or accepted by mainstream as true, are still tentative and open to falsification. In fact, science understands that all our existing theories and claims are just one data or one evidence point away from falsification. Multiple claims for the year of Mahabharata War. Many researchers were repeating the traditional and dogmatic belief of 3102 BCE plus or minus 200 years and claiming it as their own. Others were repeating claims of past researchers and claiming them as their own by boasting that they had tested and validated these claims. Additional researchers were putting forward new claims, not being satisfied with the existing claims, and were touting these claims so arrived to be the final word on the chronology of Mahabharata War. Majority of these researchers have shown not even an inclination of scientific methodology in arriving at their claims. I realized the urgent need to identify and eliminate superficial manipulative claims. This was not an easy task because these researchers had used different sets of evidence, arbitrary or selective, and different theories, multiple conflicting theories by the same researcher, and they had deliberately avoided evidence that would have falsified their claim instantaneously. They had presented their work in ways that made it difficult to critique and compare specific claims with those of other researchers. Since they lacked scientific acumen, the only recourse they had was to claim their work dogmatically as the final word on the subject and thus refused to respond to the criticism and refused to participate in debates. This had resulted in 130 plus claims where each researcher considered his claim to be the only truth but refused to respond to criticism of their works. Separating the genuine from the pseudo. I wondered if I could develop a framework that Mahabharata enthusiasts can understand and use it to identify superficial and manipulative claims, specifically those that employed only selective or arbitrary sets of evidence, or those who employed multiple conflicting theories to arrive at their claims, or those who had not included specific evidence that would have instantaneously falsified these claims. I also wondered if the same framework can be used to identify claims that would be considered valid, albeit tentative, based on the objective testing and logical reasoning. The logic of scientific methodology has numerous aspects. A list of key aspects of the logic of scientific discovery as follows. 1. Consistency of the theory. 2. Deductive reasoning. 3. Crisp and clear statements of theory. 4. Insistence of objective testing. 5. Insistence of testing all relevant evidence, both supporting and conflicting the theory. 6. Emphasis on corroboration and falsification rather than proving and disproving the fact. 7. The revolutionary theory should lead to growth of knowledge. I selected 5 specific elements to build my framework. 1. Evidence. 2. Testability. 3. Consistency of a theory. 4. Corroboration and falsification. 5. Growth of knowledge. Grains and chaff separation matrix. Trademark. I developed a framework and named it as Grain and Chaff Separation Matrix. Trademark. The lower end of the vertical axis of evidence is defined by arbitrary or selective evidence, and the upper end of this axis is defined by all relevant evidence. The horizontal axis of testability is defined by discrete definitions of yes or no. These simple criteria allow us to place any claim into one of the four categories or four quadrants. A research effort that focuses on preservation of ancient narratives without any concern for testing them to check if they are valid or not can be described as metaphysical and logical. This preservation of tradition is a critical function, and only because of the hard work of numerous individuals our ancient heritage remains preserved for our benefit. A research effort that focuses on analyzing all relevant evidence in the light of a specific theory and is concerned with proposing a theory in such a fashion so that all evidence becomes testable can be described as scientific and logical. Dharmic assertions is the desired approach and thus worthy of imitation. This is a rare occurrence, involves lot of hard work and luck. If successful, such efforts lead to revolutions. A research effort that has semblance of testability due to its comprehension of the need for testability but otherwise lacks the rationality of including all relevant evidence can be described as illogical and testable. Speculative and manipulative claims is an undesirable approach. Unfortunately, most of the research work on the dating of Mahabharata and Ramayana fall in this quadrant. The remaining quadrant of the Tamasic skepticism is characterized by metaphysical arguments and lack of action. This includes invoking of specific references or observations from the ancient narratives that are not testable and thus metaphysical, which are then employed to argue for futility of research efforts or to claim non-historical nature of these ancient narratives. To enable these viewpoints, the emphasis is placed on descriptions, references, or observations from ancient narratives that are not testable. The existence of such non-testable observations is employed to justify unauthenticity of numerous other observations that can be tested. The framework can be easily modified to explore or represent other aspects of scientific methodology. However, the fundamentals remain the same. For example, if the framework is applied to the attitude of the researchers, then it can be represented as follows. Epoch of Arundhati. The fact that one simple observation, now famous, the Arundhati Vasishta, that is AV observation, was not addressed by 99% of the researchers, and the fact that remaining 1% who acknowledged this observation had failed to empirically validate this observation led me to my own journey in determining the year of Mahabharata war. Bhishma, CE 2:31, GP 2:31. या चैषा विश्रुता राजंस्त्रैलोक्ये साधुसम्मता अरुन्धती तया शेष वसिष्ठः पृष्ठतः कृतः. The objective testing of this observation led me to the revolutionary inference that the Mahabharata war did not happen any time after 4508 BCE. This was revolutionary because 95% plus of all existing claims for the year of Mahabharata war claimed a year that was after 4508 BCE. Thus, this single observation falsified instantaneously 95% plus of all existing claims. Readers and researchers with a solid comprehension of the scientific method recognized the revolutionary nature of this discovery. The year of Mahabharata war. I validated not only AV observation but also 200 plus additional astronomy observations. Each observation was tested in an objective and thus scientific fashion in multiple ways via manual mathematical calculations and sophisticated astronomy software. I conclusively proved 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war. I sent copies of my work to more than 50 individuals who had either proposed a timing of their own or had endorsed someone else's claim for the chronology of Mahabharata war. While two of them acknowledged the receipt of my book, there was no intellectual response from anyone either agreeing with my proposal or disagreeing with my proposal. After a few years went by, I would hear some of these researchers making feeble attempts to discredit my work. However, no researcher to date has come forward to debate his or her claim against my claim of 5561 BCE. I should mention that the claim of 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war was originally made by Dr. P.V. Vartak sometime in 1980s. 5561 BCE, the planetary evidence. I explained multiple descriptions of all distinguishable planets from the Mahabharata text for the very first time, and so were the descriptions for the phases and positions of the moon through the 18 days of the war. I solved the unsolvable problem of Vakri motions of Mars and Jupiter. I also explained each instance of the retrograde motions of planets Jupiter, Saturn, Mars, Venus and Mercury as described in Mahabharata text. My theory of visual observations of the sky. As a scientific theory, my theory met with great success. All other Mahabharata researchers have failed miserably on this account of scientific theory, notwithstanding their claims. A revolutionary theory is defined by its ability to do the following. 1. Preserve the success of previous theories. 2. Explain observations not explained by previous theories. 3. Make new predictions. My theory succeeded on all three accounts and way beyond these three requirements. Before going into these details, it would be useful to mention some of the few and key predictions of my theory. Duration. Number 1. Duration of 98 days for Bhishma on the bed of arrows before he passed away. 2. A definition for Vakri, that is oblique motion across the ecliptic. Vakri motions of planets that is different than what we interpret as Vakri, that is retrograde motion of planets in modern Indian astronomy. Number 3. 5525 BCE as the year of flooding and destruction of Dwarka. 4. Identification of retrograde motions and descriptions of planets. This prediction was necessitated by my original theory in explaining Vakri motion of planets. 5. Hydrology and geology profile of the Saraswati river at the time of Mahabharata war. The ability of a theory to make novel predictions by itself is considered a great success of the theory. It does not matter if the predictions come out correct or not. This is because even if a prediction cannot be validated by experimentation or evidence, it still leads to the growth of knowledge. It is then doubly fortunate that not only did my theory lead to numerous novel predictions, but it also led to empirical validations of all these predictions. For example, prediction 1, 2 and 4 were validated by additional astronomy and chronology evidence of Mahabharata text, and predictions 3 and 5 were validated by oceanography, geology, geophysics, climatology and hydrology evidence identified in the recent years 1980 to 2018. Preserving successes of past theories, explaining the observations and phenomena not explained by past theories, making novel predictions that are objectively testable, and to top it off, validation of these novel predictions by empirical evidence goes a long way in establishing the scientific basis of 5561 BCE as the year of the Mahabharata war. Virtual silence of Mahabharata researchers. Many readers ask me the reason for the virtual silence of other Mahabharata researchers, and I want to tell them that this is not a unique phenomenon. All revolutionary theories are ignored in the beginning with the hope that they never gain traction and hopefully forgotten. The other reason these revolutionary theories are ignored because those who want to challenge these theories find it hard, if not impossible, to challenge them and refute them. The inability of Mahabharata researchers to challenge my work is not surprising. There are a few researchers who did attempt to challenge my claim, mostly with the borrowed claims of other researchers. The attempts backfired as it led to exposure of not only faulty understanding of their methodology but also revealed their superficial knowledge of Mahabharata evidence. Their attempts to criticize my claim showed their lack of inferential acumen as well as their ignorance about Mahabharata evidence. Thus, their efforts made my claim even stronger than before, while their own claims appeared more ridiculous. What could be the secret sauce that led to this consistent outcome? And the name of it is Astronomy Poison Pill. Astronomy Poison Pill. The Astronomy Poison Pill APP is a fact, objectively testable, that creates a crisp, clean, rational, and scientific shield of extreme mathematical certainty against dogmatic, skeptical, or superficial and manipulative claims for the chronology of India's ancient narratives, and in turn for the chronology of ancient Indian history. My work resulted in a series of poison pills. The most potent poison pill is the now famous Arundhati Vasishta or AV observation from the second Adhyaya of Bhishma Parva of the Mahabharata text. This single observation and its scientific testing disproved all existing claims for the chronology of Mahabharata war. This poison pill disproves instantaneously any claim for the chronology of Mahabharata war that falls after 4508 BCE, planting seeds and removing weeds. Research efforts leading to growth of knowledge in any field are equivalent to development and tending of a beautiful garden. The efforts include creative and destructive elements. Searching exhaustively for all relevant evidence, exploring alternate translations of textual evidence, exploration of multiple methods to test them objectively, formulation of a theory that is consistent and simple, objective, and testing in an objective and rigorous fashion are the creative elements of this process. This is analogous to the making of the flower bed, planting of seeds, and watering them. The destructive process involves identification of claims that are based on pseudo-scientific methods, claims that refuse to be tested against critical evidence, claims that avoid its falsification by only sticking to arbitrary and selective evidence, and claims that are made to survive by deliberately explaining away crucial evidence as opposed to explaining the evidence in the context of theory. And this is analogous to removal of the weeds from the garden. There are more than 150 specific claims by those many researchers for the chronology of Mahabharata war. Let's classify them using grains and chaff separation matrix trademark. My research work conducted over 20 plus years documented every identifiable piece of astronomy and chronology evidence from the Mahabharata text. The evidence accounted to more than 200 specific references and observations. Each of these observations were objectively tested, and this exercise led to 5561 BCE as the year of Mahabharata war. This effort in turn led to many novel predictions, and these predictions were tested against either internal evidence of the Mahabharata text or external evidence via multiple disciplines of science like hydrology, geology, geophysics, oceanography, seismology, climatology, genealogies of kings and sages, relative chronology of Rigveda mandalas, archaeology, anthropology, paleontology, and genetics. The claim for the year 5561 BCE was corroborated and validated with flying colors by testable evidence from each of these disciplines of science. The establishment, propagation, and further testing of the theory and claim 5561 BCE is based on its scientific character is analogous to the creation of a beautiful garden. The framework also displays the harsh realities of poor scholarship. Most of the researchers and their claims fall into the superficial and manipulative quadrant. These researchers employed only arbitrary and selective evidence. Thus, the framework allows us to identify those superficial and manipulative claims. These fraudulent claims are the weeds and need to be recognized for what they are and must be removed. Astronomy poison pills kill these weeds. Yet the weeds are strong and entrenched deep in the popular psyche. And if we want to protect ourselves from future outbursts of such weeds, we must comprehend the potency of astronomy poison pills. This book is written to explain the potency of two additional poison pills that emerged from the post-Mahabharata war event of Bhishma Nirvana. Chapter 2. Evidence of Bhishma Nirvana. Facts are stubborn things, and whatever may be our wishes or our inclinations or the dictates of our passions, they cannot alter the state of facts and evidence. John Adams. Bhishma is one of the key personalities from Mahabharata. The Mahabharata text reserves for us the descriptions of his activities. He fought reluctantly on the side of Duryodhana during the Mahabharata war. He was one of the most powerful warriors of his time. We will restrict our narrations to the happenings that began with Mahabharata war and ended with the passing away of Bhishma. Bhishma was the supreme commander of Duryodhana's side and fought for the first 10 days of the war. He fell in the battleground on the 10th day of the war, pierced by arrows. As Bhishma fell, his body was held above the ground by the shafts of arrows. When all gathered around him, Bhishma told them that his head hung because of no support. Arjuna gave Bhishma a pillow of arrows, befitting a warrior. The war continued for additional 8 days and ended with the defeat of Duryodhana by Bhima. That very night, Ashwatthama killed the sons of Draupadi and many other warriors of the Pandavas' side. Bhima and Arjuna humbled Ashwatthama the next day. On this day, the Kuru women arrived at the battlefield in search of the dead bodies of their beloved. Yudhishthira arranged the fire rites for the dead and then left for the bank of Ganga, along with many others. He stayed on the bank of river for a month and then returned to Hastinapur. Yudhishthira arrived in Hastinapur along with his brothers, Dhritarashtra, Krishna and others. Yudhishthira was crowned a king and he assigned various administrative posts to specific individuals, assigned palaces to his brothers and honored Krishna. Krishna reminded Yudhishthira to go and visit Bhishma, who was lying on the bed of arrows at Kurukshetra. Yudhishthira immediately left for Kurukshetra along with his brothers, Krishna, Satyaki, Yuyutsu, Kripacharya, Sanjaya and others. They arrived at Kurukshetra and met Bhishma. It is on this day that Krishna told Bhishma that Bhishma had 56 additional days left to live. That is, the day of winter solstice was 56 days away in the future. Yudhishthira continued to visit Bhishma during the day for the next 6 days and he returned to Hastinapura for the night. On the 6th day, Bhishma recited Vishnu Sahasranama to all present and then asked Yudhishthira to return to Hastinapura and return to Bhishma only when the sun turned north, that is, only after the day of winter solstice. Yudhishthira left Bhishma and returned to Hastinapura along with his brothers, his ministers, Krishna, Satyaki, Dhritarashtra, Gandhari and lived there for 50 nights. When the sun had turned north, he visited Bhishma along with his entourage. It is on this day that Bhishma left his body and became one with the universe. The narrative of Bhishma Nirvana is so straightforward that one can only wonder what made all Mahabharata researchers of the past and the present, no exceptions, blatantly ignore the clear evidence and concoct their foolish theories and illogical explanations. We will get to the bottom of this intellectual rot. Can we still call it intellectual? However, we must first set out the factual evidence of Mahabharata text. 6+ references of Bhishma Nirvana. When I wrote my first book, I identified 6 specific references that are sufficient to explain the entire 92+ days long duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows. 23+ references of Bhishma Nirvana. When I began discussing this evidence with other Mahabharata researchers, they began accusing me of misinformation and tried twisting the interpretation of these 6 specific observations related to Bhishma Nirvana. In responding to their specific objections, I extracted additional chronology and narrative references to falsify their misinterpretations. These amounted to 23 references. These 23 references are also part of my first book. While I was successful in falsifying their misinterpretations, they did not give up and continued to come up with juvenile and illogical objections against my assertions of 52+ day long duration of Bhishma on the bed of arrows. These researchers thought that they were objecting to my assertion. However, they were really objecting to the internal evidence of the Mahabharata text. Not surprisingly, the Mahabharata text supplied me with ample evidence to counter their illogical objections. The result of this endeavor led to many more than 23 observations for Bhishma Nirvana. They are presented in this book. 61 plus references of Bhishma Nirvana. The evidence can be analyzed by broadly classifying it into two categories. 1. Chronology evidence, and 2. Astronomy evidence, and then testing it in the context of 3. Background knowledge of fundamental and applied astronomy. Continuing the chronology evidence with the astronomy evidence allows us to set constraints on the events of Bhishma Nirvana. Interpretations of astronomy evidence along with constraints and durations of Bhishma on the bed of arrows allows us to estimate the epoch of Bhishma Nirvana. The evidence also enables us to perform sensitivity analysis on the epoch of Bhishma Nirvana that produces a robust time interval for the Bhishma Nirvana. We will begin with chronology evidence. This continues to chapter 3 of Bhishma Nirvana.